Hello, welcome to the stream. Hope everyone is having a wonderful day. And today is gonna be a long stream. And yesterday, there was a Campfire Chat for the PTR 2.2.0, and there was some new updates for the season 8 and some changes, and they have also posted the PTR 2.2.0 patch notes, and there were some big updates and changes. And what we're going to do is I'm just gonna watch the dev stream yesterday because I wasn't able to watch it, and so we're gonna watch it, and then we're gonna pause along the way to give our comments.
Hello Diablo community, welcome to another Diablo 4 Campfire Chat. This is our PTR Campfire Chat for Season 8. My name is Adam Fletcher, I'm the Director of Community here. Of course, I'm joined by this panel. A lot of familiar faces.
Hello, Mike Tess.
Introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Colin
Mike Tess.
I'm a Design Director on Diablo 4.
Hey, I'm Derek Nunez. I'm a lead seasons designer here on Diablo 4.
And hi, I'm Charles Dunn. I'm a class designer working on the final design team.
Awesome.
So since we're doing okay now, so let's repeat, rinse and repeat. Okay, I'm starting to echo now, so I'm gonna reduce the volume on my laptop. Okay, I think we're good to go. So, all right, let's start from the beginning. All right.
Hello Diablo community, welcome to
Just having a sip of my coffee while watching.
PTR Campfire Chat for Season 8. My name is Adam Fletcher, I'm the Director of Community here. Of course, I'm joined by this panel. A lot of familiar faces. Do you guys want to introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Colin Feiner. I'm a Design Director on Diablo 4.
Hey, I'm Derek Nunez. I'm a lead seasons designer here on Diablo 4.
And hi, I'm Charles Dunn. I'm a class designer working on the final design team.
Awesome, and we're also joined by Ruben Marquez, aka Bloodshed. He's actually behind the scenes. He'll be playing through some gameplay that we're going to be showing off here in a little bit. Oh, there he is. He's saying hi, waving. We'll see more of him here in a little bit with maybe not Marak dancing more. We got to see.
Oh, that's the name Marak.
Before the stream actually started. Crazy day. First, I do want to start off with that we had a smoothie delivery this morning, and Marcus is not here. As you can see, I'm here hosting this because he forgot my smoothie in the order. So I just kicked him off the stream. No, I'm just kidding. But I told him I'd bring it up because I'm like, oh, my smoothie's not here. But either way, we have a lot to talk about regarding Season 8. Important things. And that's actually the end of the stream, so that's all I wanted to bring up.
Thank you.
No, we have a lot to talk about for Season 8 PTR, but I know a few other topics that we wanted to hit on was kind of related to some of the quality of life stuff that's going to be coming with this specific season based off of feedback and things we've seen within the game, and also one big topic is around mid-season updates. It's actually something that a lot of people have been asking about, and we do want to give a little bit of an update on what mid-season updates will be going forward and how we're kind of thinking about it from here. So Colin, did you want to talk a little bit about how we're planning on doing mid-season updates?
Yeah, I think first it's helpful to sort of talk about the history of the mid-season balance patch. Originally, when we had talked about mid-season, it was pretty early in the life cycle of Diablo 4. We would add a ton of items, and we do sort of envision doing a lot of big swings in terms of big nerfs to overperforming builds and big buffs to underperforming builds. But as we've seen, we've added more progression and things like Season 4 itemization, there's a lot more time investment in terms of getting your build online and really refining and optimizing it. And what we found is when you put so much time into your character, it feels really bad when we nerf things, right? So Season 6 is a great example where you might have done so much work to temper your gear and masterwork your gear and level up those paragons that we were really hesitant to do like a big nerf swing as part of the mid-season balance patch. Sort of on the other hand, right, we didn't want to massively buff underperforming builds to match the overperforming builds, because we didn't want to create this insane, sort of arms race, and then we're at pit tier 9,000, right? It'd be ridiculous. So what we ended up doing was actually kind of like anemic number tweaks. Like they weren't really necessarily making a big impact, and we took a step back and sort of asked ourselves, like, well, what are we actually getting out of this? What are you, the players, actually getting out of this? And I think we're at a sort of point where we want to pivot and adjust our philosophy a little bit. And I think we've already seen some of this philosophy come to life in season 7.
Yeah, exactly. I know, especially in the beginning of the season, people probably saw us make some tweaks in the first couple weeks related to some really crazy numbers that maybe they weren't even numbers in some of the stuff that people saw in the start of the actual season. Yeah.
So all that is to say, I think
Actually, they didn't made a mid-season patch wherein they buff or they made some nerf, though they just fixed the bugs fixes.
We're going to take that time.
I think that's also a good way. Like, people have already invested so much on a build, and then suddenly they nerf it, so people will lose. They will lose fun on the game, right?
That we're adding are going to be really effective, and there's a lot of new fun ways to play. This doesn't mean we're never going to balance or touch the game. It actually means we're just going to shift our efforts to the beginning of the season. Yeah. So early on, we're going to be pretty vigilant in terms of things that are underperforming or way overperforming and acting quickly on them.
Yeah, the goal here is really to get everything closer in terms of like just like less egregious builds being super high up there. We saw that, I think, specifically in like season 6 with like the Spiritborn, and it kind of stayed consistent that way. We know we got a lot of feedback of like, hey, this feels kind of poopy if my build is like 30-40 pit tiers below, and so the goal is really to kind of bring and keep things more aligned.
Well, especially the Bloodwave is really dealing a lot of damage
in the first couple weeks. I know there's going to be more effort in putting tweaks during that time to really respect the player's time as well.
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, that timing's really important, because like our mid-season updates in the past had come a month or a month and a half into the season once players have been really invested in their build, and now we're going to be much more focused on rapid updates, within a week or two after the season launch, to make sure that if we are making those adjustments, it is at a point where, hey, you're not complete with the season, you're not done yet, and you can adjust, and you can make sure that your time is respected in that way.
Definitely. So to really clarify, when a season launches, I'll use Bloodwave as an example. That was something we saw pretty early on, and it was way too overtuned, right? Like, you didn't even really have to invest in your character to get to a point where you're godlike.
Yeah, it's like once you have the Casimate's Legacy, it's like it's done. Like, without even probably masterworking the items, like you are already can clear 100 right away.
S-tier build right now in this season.
S+.
S+ for sure. I think that the goal is not to immediately take it to F or even immediately take it to C or anything like that. It's really keep it still in S, but like also make sure that it's still like at least lined up with like the other builds that might be up there in that top tier.
Conversely too, I just want to make it super clear, if we see things that we added that are new, for example, if the seasonal powers aren't performing in a way that feels really powerful and crunchy, we're going to be buffing those. So it's not only looking out for the S+, it's also looking for the things that missed the mark. So we're going to be buffing those also.
Awesome. Yeah, so I know that players at the start of Season 8 will see us be a lot more reactionary towards those first couple of weeks in the early part of that season. So yeah, just wanted to clarify that with players, because we've seen a lot of questions about mid-season updates. Is this a mid-season update when they see a patch or something like that? And so going forward, I know that's going to be the plan as we look at updating the game in the future.
And if you hide things early, I will Liam Neeson your ass. I will know.
There you go. You heard it first. Colin's just waiting behind you. Just that's what he does.
In the closet.
Like the little demon kid right
there. Exactly. The other thing that we want to talk about is kind of like state of the game, especially with Season 7, where we're at, and kind of how we're looking at that towards Season 8. I think one of the biggest biggest points of feedback we've heard related to season 7 is kind of the pace of the game. It's, you know, sometimes you blink and you're level 20 and you're like, holy crap, what happened? So I know you wanted to talk a little bit more about that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So just sort of our perspective on season 7 has been the progression is very fast, way faster than we sort of expected. Part of it is a lot of the really cool new seasonal powers. Part of it's the headhunts being super lucrative and awesome. And part of it's also just like the seasonal journey and the reputation board. There's a lot of different ways to get a ton of power in Diablo 4. And what we've seen is compared to season 6, which had a lot of positive feedback as part of our revamped progression model, is that a lot of that has sort of gone down the drain in terms of how fast players are chewing through some of the content. So we actually have a graph that we could look at. I apologize, this is terrible, but I just pulled it from the our sort of stat page. It's not the greatest, but this is a picture of season 6. You can see on the y-axis here, it was taking roughly people around 15 to 17 hours on average to get to max level. We felt like that was a pretty good journey, right? Part of Diablo is that sort of zero to hero journey, and part of what's fun about leveling is you start to sort of form a build and find a lot of different pieces early on when you're still forming your character, where customization is really fun, right? You're not necessarily locked.
Was it the reason why it is around 15 to 17 on season 6? Because was it players are, when they started season 6, they started the journey on the main quest of the expansion, so the leveling is not that fast because you are, same thing when I started playing the season 6, I started playing the main quest right away because I'm interested on what's the next chapter of the story. So of course you're still killing monsters, you're killing you're getting XP from them, you're also getting XP from the quest upon completion. But it's still different when you are really blasting on a region. Let's say you are blasting on the Helltide, you are farming regular dungeons that have whisper events, right? Wherein you can turn in those caches so that you can get more XP from the whisper caches by also adding elixirs or incenses to increase your experience. So was it, I feel like, is it that's the reason why it's around 15 to 17 hours during season 6? Maybe. I mean, that's my opinion.
Into a build, so we felt like that was a pretty good clip for hitting max level. It's on average, right? So you could either go faster or slower depending on sort of how much of a blaster you are. So we felt like that was a pretty good average, especially with difficulty tiers and your ability to sort of go faster or slower based on your pacing. And let's go to season 7 now. And it nearly doubled. So you can see that it was taking about 9 hours on average, which is kind of insane, right? Again, this is the average. So if you're like a Wudijo of the world, it's probably more like 2 hours or like 30 minutes. And that was something that
I think I was able to reach level 60 in 6.5 hours or 6 hours.
For a lot of the seasonal power and things like that, we're not going to necessarily nerf the power of the seasonal power.
And again, on season 7, it's way different. Like I said a while ago, the whisper caches are providing decent amount of XP, and on season 7, we are talking about an abundant rewards of whisper caches, and now they have introduced this ancestral and a legendary whisper caches. And then we have also on our what is that, the seasonal urn, I forgot the name, the seasonal blessings, the urn of something that you can add by investing like 4 smoldering ashes on it. It will increase, I believe, 50% chance to get more legendary or ancestral whisper caches. And as you can see, you can farm an headhunt event maybe 8 or 10 minutes and you can get 3 whisper caches. And most of the time, out of the 3, 1 out of the 3 whisper caches could be a legendary or an ancestral. And most of the time, there are some chances that 2 out of 3 are legendary. So you're getting so much XP. That's why you are so fast on season 7, because because of that mechanic. We are getting more whisper caches, and again, whisper caches provides an abundant amount of XP, and plus you get this extra experience from these seasonal blessings as well. You also have elixirs and incense, so yeah, you're getting a lot of XP.
Power. We still want you to feel powerful, but we are going to essentially take a look at the 1 to 25 experience and just smooth that out a little bit, which is going to essentially make the leveling experience a little bit closer to season 6. So it is going to be a slower from 1 to 25, but one thing we've done to sort of compensate that is we've taken a look at the itemization. We don't like that rares and sort of magic items immediately disappear after the first 5 minutes of the game.
Yeah, I think you kind of get to that point like we were talking about. If you get to like level 20, you blink and you're level 20, and then at the same time you blink and you're like, blues and yellows. I only look at oranges now, or like what's this other color? So I know that we have some changes that you wanted to talk about.
Yeah, and again, like a lot of this is in the spirit of making sure that 0 to hero journey is really satisfying, right? That's what makes it so awesome when playing Diablo, is that sort of I start with nothing and become a god, right? So we are taking a look at the itemization so that it doesn't just feel like a slog from 1 to 25. What we're going to be doing is, you know what? I'm going to jump actually into the legendaries really quick because it's really important, a really important part of this. The other thing that was contributing to this leveling sort of pace was that players are getting a legendary every 3 to 4 minutes, and that's from 1 to 60. That's not just in the end game. And it just felt like legendary item quality was just too prevalent across the leveling journey. You didn't have, you sort of hit max level. There was no journey to assembling your build. You just had everything as part of the Codex of Power. So we're also reducing the legendary rate from leveling. We're not really touching the end game legendary drop rates, but from leveling we are adjusting that. And to compensate that, to jump back into the magic and rares, we're making it so that magics can have up to 2 affixes. So sometimes you're going to find, you know, from your 1 to 25 journey, a pretty good magic item. It might actually be better than a rare, for example, because it might have dropped earlier for you. It might have higher eye power. And then we're also making it so that rares can sometimes have up to 3 affixes. And what that means is, you know, when you get a drop at level 35 from a whisper cache, right now, you know, in season 7, it feels terrible when you don't get a legendary item because you just know that it's just not even worth looking at, right? But now that rare items can have up to 3 affixes, that means that you might have a really good imprintable base. It means all the rares that drop across the game from 1 to 60 could actually be pretty great gear for you, especially with all of our crafting options. So we think that this helps smooth out the 1 to 60 journey.
That's a good update on the rare items.
The rare quality is not the best at max level still. It's going to be a lower eye power, so you're not going to have to filter through a bunch of rares at max level. We're not going to go back to pre-season 4. So yeah, we think this is this sort of smoothing out of the leveling curve, taking a look at the magic rarities or the item qualities is just going to make the experience feel a lot more rewarding and satisfying as you go through these levels.
And then I know some of the other items we've been talking about have been like a little bit of that torment progression. We've seen, you know, drastic differences between like season 6 to season 7, and it's something I know we're making tweaks to.
Yeah. So the other half of Diablo is obviously the max level end game, right? And we've heard a ton of feedback that, like, you know, it just feels like a weekend game right now. You can just blast through all the torment tiers. There's nothing that's really satisfying about it. There's nothing to work towards just because you're just getting so much power so frequently and just really crushing this content. So what we've done here is, if we go to the slide, we've actually given, actually let me jump into some of the stats here because I think it's really interesting. A lot of people got to Torment 4 very quickly. So on average, it was taking players around 15 hours to get to Torment 4. That's like roughly double how quickly it took in Season 6, which is kind of insane. Again, it's the culmination of seasonal powers and all this crazy stuff going on. And the other part of it is that 50% of players were actually hitting Torment 4. And just from a philosophy standpoint, we really want like whatever the hardest Torment tier is.
Well, especially if you got the Casimate's Legacy on this season.
That means that
you can blast immediately, I guess, even at the hit 100 right away.
Players to actually get there, and it's not hitting the mark. So what we're going to do is make some adjustments. So Torment 1 is now going to start at pit tier 10, which means we've effectively added 10 pit tiers to the pit because now Torment 1 starts earlier, and then
Torment 1 now starts at PTR 10. I believe Torment 1 is 20, right? So they have reduced it to 10. And now they're increasing the Torment by another 20%. Okay. So are we saying, like, how is that increasing by 20%? So Pit is... Torment 4 will be equivalent to Season 7 Pit tier 76. It was 65, now it feels 76. Okay. I would say increase in 65, increase in 20%. So I would say Pit tier 10, it's still not that hard, increasing by 20%. I would say it is just tier 12. So I don't know how is that increase in terms of, like, because of this. I'm just looking at the season. It says here Torment 4, an equivalent of Season 7 P tier 76. So 65. You get that 20% of the 65. I'm just using the reference of the 76 against 65. So that's 11 tier increase. So okay. Because we're just assuming 65, so we add 20% of that, so that's around 13. So you add 13 on 65, so that's roughly Pit 78, I would say.
And we've also increased the Torment Pit scaling, health by roughly 20% multiplicative, and then some damage increases.
Yeah, and that pit scaling is every level of a pit is multiplicative on previous levels. So it's not just like, oh, whatever pit I was at, it's now 20% harder. It's actually like kind of stacking 20% every level. So the end result is that, you know, a pit tier 100 is much harder than it was before, and that will that makes it, you know, harder to reach that absolute.
So it's a stacking 20%.
Those builds and those blasters who are getting up to that highest pit tier, it's going to be quite a bit harder to get to quite that same level next season.
Yeah, absolutely. So with that, it sort of culminates in moving Torment 1 to set pit tier 10 and effectively adding 10 pit tiers and increasing the multiplicative.
But I hope the rewards will be much more greater. So of course, more challenge, more rewards. I believe players are okay with the difficulty as long as the rewards are better. Say more ancestral items that will drop, and there is a 50% chance, say the chance of getting a double GA will increase as you go up on the tier.
On the silly thing that I do. Conversely, I just want to cover this really quickly, though. Torment 4 isn't going to be insanely harder than it was before. It's going to be roughly around pit tier 76 is on live right now, so season 7. So think about the game that you're playing right now. Torment 4 is going to be about 11 pit tiers harder. So it's still achievable. It's just that upper end is also just going to be that much harder to sort of climb through.
Awesome. So we got a lot of changes coming for.
Are they going back?
Sort of climb through.
Give me a second. So on average, 15 hours from level 60 to Torment 4, 50% of players hit Torment 4. Okay.
It's just that upper end is also just going to be that much harder to sort of climb through.
Awesome. So we got a lot of changes coming for like Torment scaling, obviously some itemization changes. So the big thing being as you're leveling up, you're going to see a lot more.
So roughly 15 hours to reach level 60.
Blue and yellow items there. And then of course, as you mentioned, the big caveat is like at 60, the item power on legendaries is still going to be the best method and the best items to actually grab. So yeah, lots of big changes coming up. Great to actually walk through all of them. I know we
But as long as every season the mechanic, like this whisper event, the headhunt events, maybe it's not the same as this, but the system wherein people are engaging to play the new season mechanic, wherein they're still killing a lot of monsters, and then getting more rewards from completing those events. I think people will still be okay, even though the time to level up from level 1 to 60 is now doubled as long as the progression of the gameplay is still fun. Unlike, let's just say, back on season 6, you only have this the Realm Walker, and it doesn't provide that much XP, right? You have to get inside, and then the density of the monster is not that high. Rather than your intent of going to the Realm Walker is just to get those potions, to get that an additional 15% experience boost. So people will just be farming Helltide or going to the Whisper event, doing this, right? So it's just an old mechanic, an old gameplay of the game that you are going to play again in order to level up. So so that's I hope that on every season they have this kind of a gameplay mechanic for every season, that even though the game takes longer to play, as long as the event is fun, more monsters to kill and more rewards, I think that should be okay.
We have a ton more to talk about specifically around the new season. So thank you, Colin. We're going to jump over to Derek, because I know we do want to talk about the new season and what players are actually going to be experiencing in this PTR. Again, just to redefine what PTR is for some people, because I got messages from people going like, well, PTRs are sometimes buggy. And I'm like, well, it's a PTR, so it is like a beta or an alpha, an early look into a game, so we expect that. There will be like known issues, and we'll actually have those known issues on our forums, so people can actually see them. You can report bugs. It actually helps when you guys actually jump into a PTR and experience it, and give us feedback, because that helps tweak the start of the season for the better, essentially. But with Season 8, we will be having, of course, a PTR, and we'll be talking about it here in a second. And if you remember with Season 7, we kind of had this like this overarching theme with like big changes in that season. One was specifically around, was mostly focused around like the Whispers. Right. And of course with Season 8, we have another overarching theme that we're really going to be talking about, where we'll be kind of even seeing an old friend. So Derek, do you want to chat about it here?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So yeah, as you mentioned, seasons are kind of like our opportunity to shine focus on an existing system and really amplify or celebrate or enhance it within that respective season. So we've seen that with Season 4 with the Helltide revamps and whatnot, as you mentioned. Season 7 was the emphasis on the Tree of Whispers and Bounties. So as Colin kind of mapped out the journey to the end game, we wanted to shine focus on a major end game feature, namely surrounding our bosses. And we have a lot of really cool bosses in the world of Sanctuary, but more specifically the lair boss system, or as
new bosses
reference it to as the boss ladder. So Season 8 focus is on the lair boss system. We're going to be doing a whole mess of new things to it. So we're adding new bosses, new mechanics, quality of life updates, and a revamped materials loop that I'm going to be covering throughout the course of the segment. So first I just want to kind of talk about the new bosses and additions to the roster. So when we're talking about the lair bosses, these are like the biggest, baddest, bosses of Sanctuary. So we're looking at how do we add to the roster in a meaningful way, but also which bosses do we add that are impactful and versatile enough to carry the entire theme of a season? So with that in mind, we're just asking ourselves a question of which are the right bosses to bring. You mentioned an old friend. So we had to choose something that was versatile. We had to choose something that was big, bad. So that's where we go to Belial. Yes.
Oh.
Belial's return. Belial's back in Sanctuary. He is climbing his
D3
way to the top of the lair boss ladder. He is the new.
This is the
challenge within the ladder. He is the highest challenge.
It's like the supreme form.
Reward, and he also has some very unique reward-related tricks up his sleeve that I'll cover a little bit later. So
this is nice.
Just know that Belial's back, and he's also just not joining the party alone. He's bringing
big
friends from our vessel of
like
hatred.
a world boss. That's nice.
Is our buddy Urvar. So Urvar's joining the roster of the lair boss ladder system. He's going to be filling out kind of like the lowest rung of the ladder. So he's going to be joining the party with the Varshans and the Beast and Ice and whatnot. So Urvar's back, and we're also bringing back another Vessel of Hatred
Ooh.
character, the Harbinger of Hatred.
So happy for this.
Yeah, no, this one.
I love this fight.
We're gonna see a little bit more of this guy in just a little bit, but the Harbinger of Hatred will be joining kind of the second rung of the ladder with the likes of Duriel.
I think this
and
is
Andorra.
the
And
initial
one thing I just
vessel
wanna
of
stress is that,
Mephisto.
both of these,
The
Vessel of
wolf
Hatred bosses will,
before he
dig
went
the
into
shared pools of
the
other bosses
Akrat's
within their
host
respective tier, but also
body.
have some
Host body.
additional bonuses that is specific to the vessel.
So
of
these are the
Hatred,
three new
like the
bosses:
resource
Urvar,
attributes and runes. But Belial, for all intents and purposes, is available to everyone, and he is just
the Harbinger,
the challenge of the boss ladder.
Harbinger Mephisto,
Harder than Duriel
and Belial.
right now. He's going to be harder, more rewarding than even those.
Absolutely, yes.
This is nice.
New top tier.
Yeah, new top tier. Belial, Lord of Lies, he does not mess around.
And I'm really excited about this because I think this is going to pair really well with the sort of leveling journey and the tournament progression where we're making things a little bit more.
The only question is what's their mechanic?
It's really like
But they're gonna be like Andario. You cannot
from nothing and taking on these
kill them right away.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think that's kind of like the inherent cool thing about the lair boss ladder system is that you start with like the initiate level floor, you take those on, you graduate to the next level, and then now you have kind of Belial just always there looming over you.
Yeah.
That's kind of like the aspirational, yes, I get to go fight him now. But for those who know about our buddy Belial, Lord of Lies, you know that he kind of appears in different forms. So this is what we're kind of referencing as like his supreme form that appears at the top of the lair boss ladder. But he also has his, I guess, smaller, more agile, compact form. I like to affectionately refer to him as Baby Belial, but this is Belial in his more compact form. And throughout the course of the season, or I guess just the lair boss mechanics, he's going to be popping up all over the place. But I'm really excited about this version of Belial's new role in the lair boss ladder system in the sense that defeating and looting any of the lair bosses has a small % chance to initiate a surprise ambush from Belial himself. And this is really cool because this is kind of like a 2 for the price of 1 payout. So let's say I
That's
fight
cool.
Andariel, I defeat Andariel, I loot Andariel, and I get this special ambush triggered. And if I defeat Belial, I'll get a double payout of Andariel's loot. So I got the loot from Andariel, and I get another payout of Andariel's loot from defeating Belial himself. So
huge.
That's
it's
cool.
really exciting, kind of just like injection of some fun novel mechanics within the lair boss system that we're doing over and over and over again. So again, really excited about this update, and again in the spirit of teasing kind of the rewards relationship and connection that Belial has. This version of Belial has a very special connection to his larger supreme form in the lair boss ladder that I'll touch upon a little bit later. A lot of teasing that I'm kind of just setting up. There's a lot to go over.
We're going to lie to everybody.
Yeah,
We're
just
gonna-
a lie. Yeah,
as
right,
part of the theme.
Belial's actually not here. This is the lie. Yeah. Yeah. So that was that. That was the the Belial ambushes. But I also want to talk about some additional major sweeping updates that's coming in with just the system as a whole. And I want to talk about the summoning materials. As we know, the way that the system currently functions is, you go do activities, you get summoning items, you go visit the boss, and you plop them in, you summon the boss, and then, that's kind of just a flow. So when we're looking at the lair boss system, we don't just look about ways that we can add to it. We also look about opportunities to resolve or reduce some frictions, or just areas for improvement that we can have with it. Since it's a very mature system, we get a lot of feedback that we diligently ingest and talk about and whatnot on our team. So when it came to the summoning materials, we identified a couple of key points of, I guess, friction that players are currently having with it. One is, since you have to ante up your summoning materials just to summon the boss, it's kind of a feels bad moment when you realize that you just wasted X number of materials to find out that you can't defeat Duriel. Like, okay, that's wasted materials, back to the loop, maybe I'll fight him another week or two depending how fast you are, and it's just generally not a great feeling for myself or for players and whatnot.
Yeah, I definitely have run into this where it's like I'm only going to fight the boss when I can guaranteed win against it. Right. So you never actually.
And how do you know that too until
how do you know
trial and error?
Like you never really have that like actual fun fight with the boss where you're like, oh, am I going to lose or not? Because it's like, well, I'm just not going to risk it.
Yeah, I've had at times where I'm like, I don't know if my build's quite ready, so I'll try to fight a boss, and then I'm like, oh, this is really tough. Like I die a couple times, and I'm like, do I really want to keep like retrying it because like, well, I've already invested. I'm kind of committed. So with this new way, you know, I don't need to invest those right up front. I can just go and fight them right away and see how strong I am without risking the materials.
Yeah. So we're going to cover like the specificities of the new system and how it all works in a little bit. But the other kind of pain point that we identified with the current system is also just in regards to like the party play. I think my little earpiece is coming out of my ear. There you go. Now
It's a common theme on this.
Yeah.
The earpiece just pops out all the time.
We do it live here. So the other element is like just a party play, right? And as much as we want to kind of like entrust in our fellow man and whatnot and engage in the boss rotations and whatnot, we have seen, you know, some areas of friction where certain players don't engage in the boss rotations and they don't submit their materials. Like no one watching the stream would ever be guilty of this, but that does happen. It's shocking, but it does happen.
Belial is on the other side of the computer. It's like, I'll definitely pay the next rotation.
And then they leave and they take all their stuff. So that was another kind of area of friction that we experienced with the current summoning materials. So I think that's kind of enough of a preface just to set the tone for where the system is going now that we're introducing Season 8. So
what are we doing?
I don't know. Let's find out. All right. So lair keys. So summoning materials are effectively being repurposed in the
now they're
roles
free
as a new item called lair keys. And what lair keys do, well, I'll just start with this, is since there's no more summoning materials, that just means that effectively all lair bosses are free to summon. So if you're not sure if you're ready to take on a Varshan or a Duriel, just go visit them. You know, kind of use them as a bit of a training dummy to see if you can actually, take them on. But what lair keys now do is they grant access to the defeated boss's hoard or their treasure chest that they drop. So now I'll just walk you through kind of the new flow. Imagine this with me. So you enter Duriel's lair. You walk up to his altar and you just click the altar to summon him. Again, no cost to you. You fight Duriel, you defeat him, out pops his hoard, and now the Shards of Agony, which is now the lair key, you use that to open his hoard and get all
that's
the
nice.
pieces of loot that you went to go visit him to do.
And these work like Helltide chests, so you have to pay in order to get the loot, and the only loot the loot comes from the person who pays.
Yeah, that's a very important distinction, is that now every member in the party needs to have the appropriate type and quantity of the lair keys to access the loot in the hoard.
And you can still trade your keys with friends and things like that. If you have 9999, Duriel mats, you can split them in half and give them to your buddies to open the chest.
Yeah, absolutely. Sharing is caring in the system here.
And then, of course, if you're really lucky, you'll get a Belial ambush and you can get double loot.
Yeah. There you go.
Okay, that's nice.
A lot of new avenues and ways to kind of experience the system. So we also have the Stygian Stones. So Stygian Stones in Season 8 is living a new life now in the sense that we wanted to ensure that every boss in the first rung of the ladder, our initiate lair bosses, the Varshans, Grigors, Bisonites, Lord Zirs, and Urvars now, that they're all equally relevant to getting you to climb to the next rung. So in addition to, you can take a screenshot of this chart here. I won't try and walk through the entire thing, but now Stygian Stones is a
I just want to give my opinion, and this is a very good change, because especially in Season 7 we have so many malignant hearts, and same thing with especially with that malignant hearts, it causes an imbalance between because we're not really investing so much our time playing on the Helltides now, so we're not getting that living steals. We're only getting living steals maybe if we do the Undercity using the Tribute of Titans, or when we kill those right now we're killing those goblins, and where else we can get those boss summoning mats, like also on the I think even on the whisper keys, whisper caches, we can get those mats also, but it's not that much, especially for the living steel. Whisper caches grants a lot of I think some exquisite blood and distilled fear. Especially distilled fear, you can get it from clearing Nightmare Dungeon.
The drop that can drop from any of the initiate lair boss tier here, and you can crush them into
Okay. Okay, we're back.
your lair key of choice for the second rung of the lair bosses. So let's say I fight Grigor, I get a Stygian Stone, and I want to go fight Andariel. I can just crush that into some Andariel keys. And again, just giving a little bit more flexibility in how players actually engage and progress through the lair boss ladder. Again, as we know, all roads lead to Belial, Lord of Lies, the top of the pinnacle of the ladder at the end.
Give me a second. So lair boss key. So this is the lair boss, which is the our regular the summoning boss mats, which is the heart, steel, the fear, new boss mats, which is for the Urivar, the Judicator's Mask, and then from Varshan and Grégoire, Malignant Heart and Steel. It says here Shard of Agony. So is it Shard of Agony is the only mats that we need in order to summon Duriel? There's no more eggs anymore? And then Distilled Fear. So only Pin Cushendal? Then Cushendal to Andariel? And then sometimes they may drop some Stygian Stone. Stygian Stone is like a generic, like an all boss summoning key that can be used either for Durier or Andariel or Harbinger of Hatred. Okay, that's nice.
Ooh, there's a lot. All right, final thing here is the item bloat reduction. So again, with this new system, we're consolidating all the layer keys to one layer key type per boss. So no more kind of managing two different materials.
This is good to clear our stash.
It's just one material per boss. We're increasing the item stacking of these to 99, again, to cut down on some of that bloat. And one of my personal favorites here is that we're also normalizing the counts of required layer keys per boss rank. So all the initiate tiered bosses, they require the same quantity of their respective keys. So too the degraders and whatnot. So again, it's just cutting down on the total mental math and memory that is kind of affecting the, I guess, like on-ramping enjoyment of the current system.
Yeah, and Andariel only needs one material, for example, as part of this.
Yeah, absolutely. So you can see in this chart here, Pin Cushion Doll, Shard of Agony, or the Stygian Stone is kind of the wild card that you can crush to any one of them. So let's say if Andariel needed 4 Pin Cushion Dolls, you have 3 of them, but you have 1 Stygian Stone, Pin Cushion Doll, and go get Andariel's Horde. All right.
So yeah, you still get the Pin Cushion Doll. So they just call it layer keys. The heart, steel, fear, blood, and mask, they call it layer keys.
Behind the scenes here and kind of just get into just what this all looks like as part of just the in-game flow.
Hello, Derek. How you doing, man?
I'm doing great. How are you?
Awesome. Yeah, let me open up the menu for you.
All right, cool. So in this walkthrough, I'm just going to show you kind of, or we're going to show you rather, the new flow to access the lair bosses with a little bit of a sneak peek of the hardware.
They have a new icon now. That's nice.
One thing I want to just call out real quick is kind of some of the quality of life updates that we've taken to just the map presentation and the boss.
It requires 4 Abhorrent Heart.
I'll kind of just go through these kind of itemized.
Has a chance to drop ancestral unique items and mythic unique items.
Dungeon map icons have been given a little bit of a beautification treatment. So they're a little bit more bold, red, and easier to identify against the sea of other icons on the map. But now I want to talk about the tooltip, and I'll just start from the top and go make my way down. So the first quality of life update that we added was just simply printing the name of the boss that resides within the dungeon. One of the kind of ambiguities that we had with the previous version of this system was not knowing specifically which boss lives in which dungeon. Like, who does live in the Gaping Crevice, or who lives in the Malignant Tunnels. So now you can see the Harbinger of Hatred lives in the Harbinger's Den. This is probably not the best example, because who else would live in the Harbinger's Den?
I think that's correct. It says grasping crevice, but it doesn't show who is in there.
Inside of the main body description, we also just give a little bit more guidance and information on, what the value of defeating this boss is, and they're directing players to the fact that they are a source of ancestral and mythic unique items. The last two updates here are some of my favorites of this is that we also display now the required items that you need to access the lair boss's horde. If you recall the previous iteration, that was not apparent to you, so you would kind of like waste the time traveling to the boss just to find out that, oh, I have 3 or 4 abhorrence hearts, so I can't fight the boss yet. So we wanted to, again, just smoothen out the access and onboarding to the feature. And I think
What is that apparition incursion in 35 seconds?
The dungeon
New Season
directly
8
from the map.
mechanic?
So, again, no more teleporting to the nearest waypoint. We just pop directly in and just get into it. And we have
Okay, that's nice.
into here, and I think this is a great
Like
time
same thing
to
with the Nightmare Dungeon?
outline. I've talked
You just
about
go in,
new
you click the
bosses. I've talked about
dungeon,
new
then you
mechanics.
go inside, you
But
are
we have a
teleported inside
selection
of the dungeon, not
existing
at the entrance
bosses.
anymore.
And one thing that we
That's
wanted
nice.
to take is an opportunity within the season was to also enhance every other lair boss that exists within the system. So every lair boss is getting a bit of a difficulty spike and new mechanics to, again, freshen up the fights that we've been knowing and love. So if you fought the Varshans or the Duriels or even the Liliths over and over and over again, all this is in the PTR, so definitely worth checking them out again to see what's changed.
Okay.
And, how much different their experience is.
Yeah,
So no more mats.
some messed up surprises.
Yeah.
Duriel eats you.
Why did you spoil it? It's definitely worth checking out the mechanics. But again, so this is the Harbinger of Hatred, and just as a reminder, one thing that we do when we add a boss to the lair boss system is we don't just take the carbon copy, campaign version of it. We also take the opportunity to
That's nice.
inject some really crazy mechanics. So I don't necessarily want to, kind of spoil the surprises of the Harbinger of Hatred's mechanics here, but he does get pretty wild. This is a spectacle and a half of a fight.
Well, that's a big and long tentacles. So you cannot just you need to be tanky if you want to be in close quarter combat.
Yeah, we probably won't go into it. We don't want to spoil all the mechanics and everything. Even though we're kind of also spoiling a little bit of like a rogue build.
You might have noticed some interesting things on Rogue, which I'll get to in a bit.
It's spoil or it's teasing to make
Teasing. That's the
teasing
purpose.
everyone along here. But yeah, so that was a sneak peek at the Harbinger of Hatred we just talked about again, in case you missed it.
I saw Torment
All their
3,
bosses are getting
101,
boosts in
Paragon.
both their performance
It's having a hard time to
and the
kill it.
mechanics that they have. But let's, we fast forwarded past, the Harbinger of Hatred's fight. So let's imagine a world that, we fought through the whole thing, we killed
So I
him.
guess we have a
Let's show
preview of
off
the
now
difficulty
what to expect from
of the
full,
changes coming on
so
Season
we
8.
have some footage here with this very shiny
Okay.
Very shiny chest.
so we have 4 abhorrence hearts, and now we can open up the chest. Again, each one of us needs to have it. And I mentioned that Belial has a chance to surprise ambush you after opening any horde. And here we go.
Okay.
So this is meant to be a relatively rare occurrence, but this is the magic of pre-recorded footage. We can make the impossible happen. And in this case, again, painting the full picture of the scenario, you defeated the Harbinger of Hatred, you got the horde, you opened it, you got baby Belial, you killed him, and now you get another proc of double the loot.
I think
Yeah, double the loot of
they should create like some kind of
time payment of the lair keys that you deposit.
what you call that? An animation that Belial is coming. Like it's very prominent on the area, like maybe the ground turn different or something, so that it feels like there's some kind of a delay. What if you poured out right away and then he didn't know that Belial is coming, right?
Social experience in Diablo. So what we've done is the hordes themselves will have bonus chances for loot.
Well, we can check it out on the PTR on Tuesday.
Members.
Yep, no, absolutely. So, yeah, a lot of loot everywhere to give. And on the topic at the very top, I teased that Belial had a very special kind of role in the reward structure, different from every other boss. So defeating the ambush version of Belial is not just lucrative in the sense that it's a double payout. He is also the sole source of the lair keys that you need to access his supreme form at the top of the ladder, the Supreme Form's Horde. So I want to show off now the Supreme Belial's very green chest here. So you can see here, it doesn't open up right away. I have some options. So the really cool thing about the Supreme Belial's horde.
Oh,
is
that's
that
nice.
You can set it to mimic the reward drops of any other existing lair boss. So let's say if you are trying to do Duriel runs to get the special stuff that he has, and you can set your Belial to drop the Duriel loot, and he will do so at an enhanced rate. So it's even better than if you just went to go fight Duriel specifically.
Yeah, so if you're really targeted farming those specific uniques, you get, this Duriel, this version
It's
of
like Belial will.
just gives you a much better chance of doing that as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
So
And
he's more harder
not
than
just that,
Andariel and
he
Duriel.
also guarantees
So by killing Belial, will enhance further the rewards of Andariel and Duriel.
Infernal compasses. So if you want to,
This is a good one.
Infernal horde runs and whatnot, it's never a waste of time to go visit the Belial Supreme at the top of the ladder here.
Yeah, and this is in Torment 2, and it all scales with Torment. So
Exactly.
the higher-
But I do hope
Yeah,
more
this
double
is-
ancestral chances also.
Like Torment 4, you would get more loot out of it because it's a much more difficult challenge. At
It is much more.
Yeah, it scales with the torment tiers, and also if we were in a party in this example here, we'd get even more chances of great stuff out of it as well.
That's exactly right.
All right, cool. Well, that is the lair key and the lair boss. I'm just have a lot of things to cover here.
I know we want to talk a little bit about kind of it's funny because people saw it as Ruben was on the map because they probably saw a term like with apparitions and everything.
Right, yeah, there's a lot of teasing in this.
I know, a lot of teasing. This is what happens when you use a live build and everything's fine.
Yeah, it's exciting. But one thing before we hop
They
into
notice
next,
it.
I do want to reestablish so that everything that we just talked about as far as what we're introducing to the lair boss system and all the mechanics, new bosses and whatnot, that is permanent. That is just how the system works now. So everything is getting introduced in Season 8, but it's not leaving beyond Season 8. It is just there.
It'll be an Eternal also.
It'll be an Eternal. That's just how the system works. What the next segment, though, is all the seasonal specific stuff. So again, as Adam mentioned, you might have seen some.
The guest player on the people on the chat, on the live chat, is saying, "What is that apparition? What is that apparition incursion?"
Oh, the top says lair boss. Okay. Anyways, we do it live. Apparition Incursions. Apparition Incursions is a new open world seasonal event to
Fast-paced,
empower your leveling
boss
journey, but also
rush
kinda just spread
style event.
the narrative and dramas of Belial is back on Sanctuary, and he's spreading his own sense of twisted realities across the land. He's always in his effort to try and plunge the world of Sanctuary into his realm of lies, and he's doing it through this fast-paced boss rush style event that kind of takes the spirit of the open world social boss play of the Blood Maiden and making a really cool kind of just really fast-paced bam 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 boss rush style event. So I think we have some footage here just to put some visuals to it. So this is an area of the world that Belial's apparitions are kind of overtaking, and throughout the course, players are going to be defeating these apparitions to draw out up to 2 of his apparition bosses. This is pulled from a total of 10 potential apparition bosses, so each time you go through this, you'll fight 2 of them kind of randomized, so each time should be a little bit different, and all of this is leading up to a showdown against Belial himself. So again, it's celebrating bosses. It's 3 bosses per event, and the idea for this is that they're up pretty much 24/7. So we want to just encourage that hop on the boss train, ride it to the end, find the next one, and just go to your heart's content. And just celebration of bosses this season, really.
Absolutely. And what do you get for killing those bosses?
Ooh, you're gonna get some cool stuff, Colin. Let's go to the next slide. That kind of leads us into the collectible boss powers.
Okay,
Seasonal
so we have
powers.
now the boss powers.
It's already on the slide.
It's already on the slide, yeah.
We're fine.
So the theme for the powers theme for Season 8 is boss powers. So Belial being kind of like the illusionary character he is, mimicry and whatnot. In Season 8, players will be acquiring the ability to steal and mimic the powers of up to 24 targeted bosses across Sanctuary. So we have 24 collectible powers that are gathered from the first time kill of targeted bosses across the full content from level 1 till the very top. So you asked about, what do the apparition bosses give you? They're, aside from the loot and all that stuff, they're also your first source of your first 10 boss powers that make up the magic tiers. You can kind of see in this little chart here. graduating from the apparition bosses, you now go into the world bosses. So each one of our 3 world bosses have a power associated with them, and then so too do each of our lair bosses, capped off with Lilith with her own boss power that you can acquire.
It's like a ladder in the boss powers.
It's definitely celebrating the progression journey of bosses from the moment you log in to the moment that you're powerful enough to take down Lilith.
Yeah.
Belial being kind of like the star of the season, he's special. He gets 2 powers because that's just how he rolls.
Yeah. Cheating.
Yeah, and I think one of the cool things about this kind of structure, it's a very structured power climb, so little ambiguity of like, how do I get the Wandering Death's power? Well, go fight and kill him. It's just that nice little structured journey that kind of is a nice little stamp collection just to reward each kind of a tier of progression that you make across your leveling and endgame journeys. But that's not just the coolest part of it, in my opinion here, is that it's also just how the powers work this season. So you can see that we have 4 slots, the top slot and 3 little kind of like supporting slots. So the really cool thing is that each one of these powers have 2 sides to them that activate depending on which power slot you put them in. So you can have up to one main you can have up to 1 power slot into your main power slots, or you can have up to 3 power slot into your modifier slots. And I just want to dive into this Wandering Death's chest beam example here. So if I were to slot the Wandering Death's power into the main power slot, I would actually unlock the full representation of his iconic chest beam power. So the main powers is activating and unlocking the actual iconic power that is representative of the boss. We're going to show kind of a little bit of a showcase after this, but that's how that respective area of the power system works. The modifier slots, though, are cool and powerful in their own right, though. So let's say I don't necessarily need the Wandering Death's main power for whatever utility purposes. I can still get value out of the fact that I own it by slotting it into the modifier slots, which activates kind of like the side B of it, which is more of a supporting thing. So in this case, it's your main power. Now it empowers your main power to instantly execute non-boss enemies when they're within a certain threshold of life. So it's not just 24 ways to kind of express your sense of power this season. It's 48 because each of these powers have kind of like 2 sides to them.
Yeah, it's really like build your own boss power.
Essentially, yeah, it's a lot of fun just kind of like mix match, slot around and see.
I wonder what are the rest of the boss powers.
Particularly interested in going to the PTRs, like what are some of the favorite combinations, or
it's going to be interesting.
What are the favorite combinations based off of the circumstance that you're going into?
Definitely.
Yeah,
Go ahead, Charles.
One thing that I'm really excited about the system is in previous seasonal power systems, we sometimes found as you got really high, Paragon levels, your build is like super powerful. The relative impact of some of the seasonal powers was a little lower. They didn't really scale with you as well as we really wanted to. We've done an update in this season where these boss powers are going to scale with your Paragon level as you're leveling up, and so they actually are going to get more powerful as you get more powerful. Right. So the exact number that you as soon as you unlock it maybe is not the most powerful thing, but as you're powering up, it's still going to be relevant to your build at every stage of your progression.
Yeah, it's really good. And I like the fact that the powers don't kind of just live on their own little island, like they get ingrained into the other systems that we're engaging with. So that's a high level of the boss powers for season 8, and I want to toss it back to Ruben for just kind of a little bit of a live showcase of them.
Hey, Derek, thanks for all that. That was great, man.
Yeah, I'm excited. What do you got for us?
Well, I get the fun job of showcasing all these powers today, but I must confess I got my smoothie, so I'm a little jacked up today. So I'll try not to rub it in.
I'm so happy you got your smoothie. So happy for you.
I try not to talk too fast.
I'm thrilled.
Let's go ahead and open up our inventory here, and you'll notice on the left side a familiar tab is our seasonal tab, which is boss powers. So from this tab is where you'll be kind of interacting with your powers throughout the season. Like Derek mentioned, you can drag and drop them, equip them on the fly. There's no penalty. I think the team and everybody wants you to experiment.
That's a cool.
You can also upgrade them by hovering over them. There's a corresponding button.
Animation.
PC, it's F,
How you placing those?
And
boss powers in the
top
eyes of
slot
those
is
or
your
whatever
main
that
slot. Like
is.
Derek mentioned, this is where your main powers go, and all the bottom ones are your modifier slots.
Okay.
So right here, Derek's favorite was the Wandering Death's chest beam. So as a modifier, right, you can execute enemies, but as soon as you drag it over here, boom, now it's a channeled ability. And you'll notice right away, it's a prominent beam. Yeah, it works well with channeled abilities. It only works with channeled abilities, actually. And it's kind of cool with dancing.
Oh, okay. It cannot be used by any type of skill, only channeling skill.
Keep it on them a little bit longer.
Yeah, and as you can kind of tell, we're not necessarily going for subtlety in terms of the expression of these powers this season.
I'm dying. Someone in chat's like, Goku? Oh my god.
I guess we'll call it real quick. Just one thing I absolutely love is just the animations of the UI itself, and you slot these little like eyeball sockets.
Can I see when you cast a skill, attack enemies with a wave of spikes that lasts 2 seconds and deals physical damage. Enemies take 60% increased damage from Wind of Hate each time it hits them, up to 300%. Enemies take 60% increased damage from Wind of Hate. Okay, so it's not increasing damage from us, but it increases the damage that the enemies take still from the Wind of Hate. Okay.
Eyeball powers into the little eye sockets, and it blinks, and yeah, it just is kind of just fun across the board, just engaging with this.
And pops.
Yeah.
And then the modifier is hitting an elite enemy with the main boss power creates an inert blister cone with 10% of their maximum life. Killing the blister creates a blister with 10% of their maximum life for 10 seconds. So it refers with the maximum life hour of the character for 15 seconds, and then killing the blister removes 10% of the elite's life. Okay, an elite can have up to 3 blisters active at once, except for world boss. Okay.
So what do we got next?
The next one I want to showcase is Lilith's Wind of Hate, just because probably most of us have died to this before. Her spike ability from the ground.
Yep.
And it works on almost every skill.
I died a lot on that.
As soon as I dash here, I get the spikes.
Yeah.
With Barrage, you get the spikes. So you can slot it in almost every build and have fun with it. Even Dance of Knives, really cool ability there. Let's see what else we got. Another fun one, there's a transformative ability, is Juriel's Burrow. So it completely changes your evade skill, and you burrow underground. You deal damage when you go into the ground and when you exit, but the real
Game said when you evade, you now burrow underground, immobilizing surrounding enemies for 5 seconds and dealing damage on your entry and exit. You deal damage every seconds while burrowed. Evade's cooldown is increased by 4 seconds. And cooldown reduction of evade on evade is 50% as effective. I don't know if I can still use this on to replace Creeping Mist on the Army of the Dead.
The cool thing is you become immune while underground, and you can control the direction.
Oh, that's awesome.
Is awesome. Yeah,
That's one of my absolute favorite. I love that one.
You can stand still if you like, or whatever, and it scales as you get more evade charges. You get more
Okay,
burrows.
you can
So there's a lot
control
of,
the
especially
burrow
when
and
you get bosses,
unburrowing.
lots of crazy effects. You can now dodge them a little bit easier, which is great. I'm sure there's some good use cases for that.
Yeah, and even just right there, I want to just chime in and just say that we showed off a power that procs off of the evade. We showed one that procs off channeling, and one that procs off any skills. Like, one of the goals going into the design of these powers was to just remove any ambiguity about how do I actually proc it. We wanted to make it as utility focused and straightforward as possible, so that players can really easily digest and how they work it into their builds.
Yeah, that's a great point. Urvar's bombs is probably my personal favorite, as I like making builds and interesting builds. This definitely supports ultimate builds, and as you can see on the screen here, it lowers your cooldown by 5 seconds, which is great, and gives you a nice damage component to kind of top off on it. So
Reducing your ultimate cooldown.
And, Death Trap is an ultimate ability, so as soon as I pop it, you'll see Urvar's bombs kind of shoot out, and you get that lower cooldown effect as well. So it's great.
Ooh, and you get 2 death traps. I wonder how he's doing that.
Oh, no. That's on me. That's on me, guys. Yeah, all the teasing on this stream. And finally, before they play the walk-off music, I think I could showcase. Let's do Grigor's Lightning Square. So if you notice, Lilith's skill had like a slight
Lightning
cooldown.
tiles
This one
outward.
scales with your build really well. So the more you can cast core skills, the more you get these iconic kind of lightning strike panels shoot out from your character. So you can imagine. You can just
That's nice.
Thunder God here the whole time with your builds. So yeah, I think that's all I can showcase today. But I appreciate the time.
No, thank you. That was awesome. Yeah, so again, those are just like a kind of a sneak peek at just a handful of the powers. Again, throughout the course of the PTR, you'll get to experiment and engage with all of them. And again, looking forward to the feedback and just just general notes of how you incorporate into your builds and what really excites you. So I think that's pretty much the wrap up for all the content coming in Season 8 that persists beyond and within.
All the Season 8 stuff that will be available in PTR for players to actually jump into.
Gonna be exciting.
We're still going to be talking about a few more things as we get closer to Season 8 with the launch of the actual season itself. So Derek, thank you so much for walking us through everything. And of course, with a new season and a new PTR, we have a lot of changes that are coming to classes, specifically like the Rogue, which we saw someone doing those.
We can just skip.
We'll just skip the Rogue.
There's other classes to talk about.
So Charles over here is actually going to go through all the class changes that players will be able to experience and test out during the PTR.
Yeah, of course. I mean, there's tons of new bosses to fight, so how are you going to fight them, right? So let's talk about some class updates that are coming. First, I want to talk about some updates that are kind of affect all classes in some way. These are kind of a bit more generic updates. So talking about ultimate scaling, this is something that we introduced in
Ultimate scaling cap.
You get to rank 5 of the ultimate skills. Some of them had mechanics that allowed you to crank up their damage by building different stats. Right? So if you got damage while fortified, then your blood wave is going to do more damage, for instance. We think that's really cool. It enabled a lot of very powerful builds, a lot of very powerful builds. And so we're looking at ensuring that those don't like really eclipse every other option in the game. We still love that those are powerful builds.
Army of the Dead.
We don't want them to be the only option. And so with that in mind, we're looking at putting a cap on that scaling. You can scale them up to 200% bonus damage, which is still a lot. You're still doing, like triple damage. But we just want to make sure it doesn't get completely out of control with all the new stats and some of the...
Well, I don't think so that the 200% would be enough though, depending on now to say that it is still okay, if I remember correctly, because last night I was checking some of my build already, and I believe my Army of the Dead is around maybe 7,000 or 6,000 percent scaling. So 6,000 cap at 200%. That's huge. So I don't know. Like that is still huge unless you have those. They increase the damage of the Army of the Dead itself. You know what I mean? Like to make it still balanced, but to reduce, because that's where the power of the Army of the Dead is coming from. Like 40% of the golem's damage, right? So reducing it from, if it's efficient at 9,000% or 6,000%, and then reducing to 200%. So I really don't know what's going to happen, but we can check it out on the PTR and see if, it's still, if the build is still performing okay.
The scaling coming in from some of the seasonal powers that could potentially lead those to be, crowding out other options of gameplay. Additionally, we're looking at crowd control. This is something I talked about on our last Campfire Chat about how we're really looking at the moment-to-moment combat of our game. You
Is
know,
it there?
What are you doing one?
Is it they're reducing the ultimate scaling? Is it because of the what's happening of the blood wave? I believe the blood wave, like the Casime's Legacy, it has those huge multiplier damage. The pants itself is dealing a lot of damage from what I know, not just from the rank is it the rank 5? The rank 5 additional scaling damage, right? It's also the pants itself. Like unlike in the Army of the Dead, it doesn't have so much scaling. It scales further with the Sand Rune for the Army of the Dead to do overpower.
1 second to the next. And one thing that came up a lot was sometimes enemies just randomly get crowd controlled. They randomly are frozen or stunned, and
Chilling wind.
This comes from some of what we call incidental crowd control, as in lucky hit.
Is it only from us, or they're also talking about the enemies? The chilling wind.
Right. And we noticed, like, hey, we got a lot of these effects across the game in many different places, and so we looked at really toning those down, specifically in the generic spaces. I know Fist of Fate is one of a very popular unique item right now for many reasons. One of them was that kind of free crowd control, but that's something that we think wasn't really promoting the best moment-to-moment combat and most engaging flow. So that particular affix has been changed to lucky hit apply vulnerable, but a lot of the other identity of Fist of Fate is still there as well. So it still has, you know, wide ranges on things. It still does random damage and a lot of lucky hit chance as well.
Yeah, and this change really puts the value of Frost Nova and Ground Stomp. It sort of makes those more valuable and satisfying.
Right. Yeah. So if you really want to get those kind of crowd control effects, it's going to be a build choice. You're going to have to consciously do it, and you're going to like know when it's happening. It's not just, oh, they randomly got stunned, and if they didn't get stunned, maybe you got hit, and that never felt good when it was just kind of purely random.
Yeah.
Additionally, this is something that the keen-eyed among you might have spied when we were looking at some earlier stuff. We've done a bit of a naming pass on some of the damage over time effects. This is no functional change. This is just a naming thing, where we have things like physical damage, and when it's physical damage over time, we call it bleeding. And when it's poison, we call it poisoning, for instance. We didn't previously have names for shadow, lightning, or cold damage over time. We would just call it like from shadow damage over time effect.
So now
which was
they are changing the shadow damage over time to corrupting.
Shadow damage over time will be called corrupting damage. Lightning damage over time is shocking damage, and cold damage over time, which we saw with the Wandering Death chest beam, is called frostbite damage. So that's just a terminology thing. It still relates to those base damage types, the same as always. It's just a terminology update.
Cleans up the tooltips.
Absolutely, yeah. All right, so let's get on to some of the actual class updates. Starting.
Can it be shortened as a shadow dot?
All right, so our focus on Barbarian this season is about primarily about Barbarian's core fantasy of being physical and hitting enemies with a big weapon, right? In the past couple seasons, a lot of the meta builds around Barbarian have focused around things like earthquakes or dust devils, which are really cool and fun. But I think we got some feedback that, hey, I don't really feel like I'm hitting enemies with my big weapon. I'm just making a tornado that hits them, which is not maybe fulfilling the fantasy that you want out of a Barbarian.
Your core skill isn't the cool thing. It's the thing that the core skill spawns.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And that's it's cool that those exist, but we want to make sure we're also catering to that heavy hitter kind of fantasy. And so a lot of the updates this season are focused around that. Specifically, updates to double swing core skill and the twin strikes unique to make that a bit more impactful to actually be hitting. Whirlwind as well. That's getting a buff and a rework with Gore's its unique Gore's devastating grips. And then the new unique and legendary this season really talk to Mighty Throw in particular and make that just like the biggest hitting thing. Let's take a look at those uniques and the unique and legendary here. So we've got the Bane of AotD. This is a unique glove item. And it says that every 12 seconds, your next Mighty Throw is going to detonate all of its pulses instantly. Normally Mighty Throw like pulses over time. It's going to do them all at once and deal massively increased damage. And And that's going to pair up very well with the new legendary aspect of Delayed Extinction, which causes both Mighty Throw and Steel Grasp to gain multiplicative bonus damage rather than cooldown from cooldown reduction. So if you've got cooldown reduction on your gear or on the Bane of Adrenaline, for instance, that's not going to actually reduce.
I don't have much idea of the Barbarian.
Scalar for these skills.
But I don't want to skip.
So that now you've got a new
We're just gonna let the Campfire Chat
often, but when you do, they're gonna hit super
play.
hard. And so we've got a video clip of it just deleting a screen. So you walk up to the ground and they're all gone. One hit, that's all it takes, because you got all these multipliers on your one big hit. But of course, because it doesn't benefit from cooldown reduction, that cooldown is going to be pretty much locked at that 12-second mark, and so you're going to have to find some other way to.
That's a cool animation.
And you've got a new challenge for your build to overcome.
One smash, and then there's a bunch of other
It is possible that you're
maces are
with some really big
throwing
hits.
around.
Oh yeah. All right, let's take a look at the Druid. So for the Druid, I want to talk a little bit about one of the meta builds right now is revolves around Cataclysm and kind of snapshotting issues that come up with that. And so for those of you who don't know what snapshotting basically means is for Cataclysm, which is one of their ultimate skills that has a duration. So you press the button, it summons a storm around you that lasts for some amount of time. And if you get a lot of that cooldown reduction and you can cast Cataclysm a second time before the first one expires, currently on the live game, the second cast of Cataclysm will keep all of the bonuses and like bonus damage effects or guaranteed overpowers or whatever that was affecting the first one. And that was definitely not intended. That is not how we wanted that to work. We didn't want bonuses.
Okay, so that's the reason why those druids are so powerful with this Cataclysm build.
That lot of cooldown, but it was kind of promoting this gameplay where.
I just want to pause for a bit. I think this is also the reason why I believe I mentioned this when I was playing the Army of the Dead build, wherein I was saying why we cannot just let, when we cast the Army of the Dead, and then if it's active again, we summon the Army of the Dead, then, for example, the first cast is 20 volatile skeletons, and then within 4 seconds, we cast another Army of the Dead, so we release another 20 skeletons. So if we have a very high cooldown and we can cast like 3 Army of the Dead within 4 seconds, you're now talking about 60, like 30 or maybe 40 to 60 volatile skeletons for every like seconds. So I think that's also like some kind of a snapshotting wherein you can multiplicatively stack all of this damage instances of the skill does. I guess maybe that's the same reason, but right now they're saying about the ultimate scaling cap. Oh no. Oh no.
It's very feast or famine. If you successfully kind of snapshot all the buffs, this build is insanely powerful. And if you mess it up or you don't get the snapshot quite right, you're actually really weak. And that led to unintuitive gameplay and this really big divide between the best and the optimal and like kind of the average normal case scenario. So we're addressing that where we don't really want to promote that between 2 different cast snapshotting.
Yeah, we don't like snapshotting in general.
Right, yeah, the kind of snapshotting where you are persisting things between different cast instances or equipping gear and then unequipping it to maintain a bonus, those are snapshotting things that we don't think it promotes healthy gameplay. It's unintuitive in a lot of cases. You need to read a guide and follow an exact checklist to do it. That's not something that we think is good for the game. There are some cases where, with Cataclysm, giving the bonus to that whole that first time you cast it, you might say it's kind of snapshots for the duration of Cataclysm, but that's intended, where it says your next cast does something. That's what we want, but we don't want that to persist on to multiple casts or through basically infinitely. So that's one thing that we're adjusting on Druid, but we're also looking at promoting other play styles as well. We think that build is fun, but there's other ways to play Druid as well. Specifically with Stone Burst, that's the Earth core skill. It was kind of a channeled skill, which from a lot of our channeled skills, they are not allowed to overpower. But with Stone Burst particularly, we have reworked one of its legendary items to allow it to overpower when you detonate it at maximum size, which is really cool and opens up some new build possibilities for Stone Burst. And finally, I want to talk about the new unique Gathlin's Birthright. This is let's take a look at it on screen here. It's in a similar vein to Tempest Roar and Vasilei's Prayer, where it is a unique helm that is very transformational, but rather than talking to werewolves or werebear builds, it's talking to human form builds. If you don't want to embrace the wilds quite as much, you want to stay in your human form, Gathlin's Birthright is going to be the unique helm for you. It says, while you're in human form, critically striking enemies with your nature magic skills will grant you Anima of the Forest for 10 seconds. And when you whenever you gain Anima of the Forest, you are infused with bonus key passives, Perfect Storm and Earth and Might. So if you have this and you have another key passive, you could potentially have up to 3 key passives active at once, which is not something we've ever done before in Diablo 4.
That's nutty, and I love that it's on the helm. So if you really want to be a human druid, which historically hasn't been as great as like werewolf, for example, this is the helm for you.
Yeah, this is exactly that. It's in a similar spot as like, hey, this is build defining in the way that Tempest Roar is for werewolves. We want this to be the build defining helm for human form druids. Additionally, Aspect of Impending Deluge that empowers your Storm Strike, which is probably pretty useful with this human form nature magic build, which will cause your Storm Strike to deal more and also increase damage that they take from your other skills for a time. I think we've got a picture of this, or a video of this in action, where you've got your druid, it's got you you need 200 stacks of Anima of the Forest, which sounds like a lot, but it triggers on every hit. So in most combat situations, you actually stack it up pretty quick. And see, once you get this online, you're going to be empowered with Earth and Might, and with Perfect Storm, and with Nature's Fury. You have all of this power.
And the idea of three passives going at once is the key passes is crazy. Yeah.
Yeah.
Boss power slapped on top of that too.
Oh yeah, it is a lot when you get this empowered state. All right, moving on to one of my favorite classes, the Necromancer.
Here we go.
So
Necromancer
is probably the talk of the current season 7, with Bloodwave.
Here we go.
Times on stream, Bloodwave, really good.
Super power. Bloodwave, super powered.
So maybe it won't scale up with the bonus damage, at least not to the same level that it had before. We're going to put a cap on that. We also just think we generally overshot the mark on the unique item, the Kasemi's Legacy, which really, like, you get this item and suddenly you're a god. It just had
Yep,
so
I
much
agree.
power in one spot. And we like a bit more of that progression.
That's what I'm talking about. Once you got the Kasemi's Legacy, it's done. Even though you don't have the other aspects, you're already crushing the game.
As powerful as you ever need to be. That really shortcuts that journey and really makes it feel less satisfying than we want. So we're taking a look at reducing the power of that unique in particular, as well as some other adjustments to Bloodwave. We do want Bloodwave builds to still be powerful and still be an option if you like that playstyle. We just don't want it to be the S++ tier that it was in the past. Additionally, we're taking a look at Blood Lance. This is a core skill that has historically been very good in multi-target, kind of clearing out pit runs or dungeon situations. But then you run up into a boss, which, hey, we're fighting a lot of bosses this season.
Yeah, will be.
And it suddenly falls really flat because its core mechanic is about like arcing damage between enemies, and if there's only one
Like
enemy,
it scales its
what are you doing
damage
here?
through multiple
So this
enemies.
update to Bloodlance,
Like
it's going
especially
to,
the
still
Blood
retain some
Seeker
of the
aspect.
fantasy where it arcs the damage between
The
enemies,
more
but if you're
damage,
hitting a
the more
target below
lance
it's going to do
targets that
massive
you
amount of
have,
damage.
the
So
more
much better
damage
for
it will
target
scale.
situations and much more viable for bossing. And finally, the new legendary and unique for this season talks to minions. So
Ooh.
let's take a look at Sanguivar, Blade of Zir.
Oh, give me give me a second. Sanguivore. How do you pronounce it? Sanguivore. Blade of Zir. So I guess we are getting this from Lord Zir. So 60% damage to Golem and 60% damage plus The skeleton mage. So no warriors. Only golem and mage. Intelligence, good. Life is also good. 50% chance for Army of the Dead to deal double damage. This is also good because the legendary weapon, we can temper the weapon's augment. So if we're going to use this, we're gonna lose that chance to double damage for the Army of the Dead. But anyway, if this is for the Army of the Dead, it's still, I mean, I don't know how much they cap on the ultimate scale damage. I think they said 200%, right? So we still don't know. Like investing so many on our minions passive damage scaling, it doesn't scale the Army of the Dead's damage any further. It's just capped at 200%. So okay, we have +2 warrior, skeletal mage, and golem mastery. Okay, now we have another ranks here. We have a ranks on the chest, we have a ranks on the pants, right? And then we have ranks on the ring of Menden. And then now your summons deal afflict enemies with vampiric curse. Consuming a corpse also contributes a soul to vampiric curse. This is the was it the metamorphosis, or is it just the vampiric curse? I think it's the metamorphosis, isn't it? That inflicts a vampiric curse. So consuming a corpse also contributes a soul to vampiric curse, which can now stack up to 20 souls. So when we consume corpse, we add a stack of vampiric curse. Okay, then Army of the Dead can now unleash the souls of vampiric curse, causing both Army of the Dead and the souls to deal this 10% increased damage per soul unleashed. So meaning at maximum 20 souls times 10, so that's an additional 200% increased damage. So are we talking about increased damage on top of the maximum cap of 200%? So that's going to be 200% times 3. I mean, still not enough. 600% still. I don't know.
Unique two-handed sword. So this weapon will empower your summons, so your minions and your Army of the Dead, to affect enemies with Vampiric Curse. Now, for those of you who played back in Season 2, Vampiric Curse was a mechanic that we introduced in Season of Blood, where you affect enemies with it, and as you kill them, you kind of collect their soul. And then you can unleash these souls. They kind of run out from you and explode, and it's a really satisfying moment. And we put that on a handful of legendary aspects, but now
I think that is the metamorphosis, wherein when you evade the enemies, you afflict vampiric curse, and then you stacks this, and then when you use, like, for example, what are those subterfuge, like defensive skills, if I'm not mistaken, then you unleash these souls and do this kind of explosion.
all of your summons will affect enemies with Vampiric Curse. And you can unleash them with Army of the Dead. And when you do that, the souls from Vampiric Curse and Army of the Dead itself will deal massively increased damage, scaling with how many souls you've collected.
It's huge. I love Minion Necro. It's like my favorite one.
Oh yeah. This is really cool for Army of the Dead and Minion Necro to just really be that impactful moment of summoning an army of skeletons to just eviscerate the enemies. And additionally, aspect of service and sacrifice. I love playing with this one. This one feels so good to play. Your skeleton warriors explode on death, dealing a massive chunk of physical damage to surrounding enemies, and to help make sure they die, they lose 25% life per second while in combat.
But take note, if we're going to use this like in combination with this new unique, and then using this new offensive aspect, then we shouldn't use the race skeleton because the race skeleton heals the minions. And I guess that's the reason why they say skeleton mages take 90% less damage, so that you're not worried about your mages dying, right? We're not worried about our mages dying. Okay? If we are not casting the, because we need to let this warrior die in order to explode.
You're going to be needing to resummon them quite often, but when you do, hey, it's good because they're going to be detonating for this massive chunk at the end.
Skeletal mages,
While you're resummoning all your warriors,
they deal
your mages are gonna be
100%
super
increased
tanky,
damage.
less damage.
That's
and they
nice.
deal massively increased damage.
That is
So you're gonna keep your
nice.
mages up pretty much all the time, and you're going to be focusing on resummoning the warriors to run in there and explode and do their damage that way.
That's awesome. It's a really clever way to make it feel like you're constantly summoning and
Yeah.
you have your backline of mages just obliterating.
Yeah, it's great. Let's take a look at Sanguivar Blade of Zir in action.
Right.
Oh no, sorry, this is actually service and sacrifice. So you've got your skeleton warriors, the skirmishers, they run up there. And then here's Blade of Zir, right? You get all those like skeleton warriors running out when you activate Army of the Dead. Not you just get the normal ones that are running around, but then they all you unleash a stream of them straight from you with the Sanguivar.
I don't see the what's going on there.
You with the
So the okay. So usually, basically, the Army of the Dead is spawning the volatile skeletons. So the Army of the Dead spawning the volatile skeletons on the enemies, like this one.
with the Sanguivar. Straight from you with the
So this guy's right here. So these are spawning on the enemies. This one and then this one. However, I see this bunch of skeletons coming out, spawning from us. I believe this is the souls that were... This is the stack souls that we have collected, that we have stacked before activating, before casting the Army of the Dead.
with the Sanguivar.
How many are there? Can we count? Are those max? Just want to see.
You unleash a stream of them straight from you with
So there's 1, 2, 3.
you unleash a stream of them straight from you.
So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. This is 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20.
With the Sanguivar.
Yep. So that's the maximum stack of 20.
Impactful, ultimate skill there.
So meaning, on top of the volatile skeletons that the Army of the Dead summoned, so you are unleashing these additional souls. But in order to stack the souls, we need to inflict them with... we need to consume corpse.
Yeah, Army of the Dead is just so underutilized, so I'm so happy to see it come back into the fold.
It's great.
Okay, this is...
Next up, we've got the one we've been teasing for a bit. Thank you, Ruben. The Rogue. Let's take.
This is the this is fun.
So, as you
That is
probably
fun.
guessed, the theme of
That is
Rogue this
fun.
season is looking at trap builds, right? With both Death Trap and Poison Trap in a way. Historically, Poison Trap has been kind of underrepresented. Death Trap builds have been quite popular, pretty powerful, and a lot of fun to play. Poison Trap kind of fell by the wayside a little bit. It had a number of issues that we're looking to address this season to really promote Poison Trap as a viable standalone build. And what we were seeing from Ruben was the Scoundrel's Leather rework. Now, this is a unique chest item that's been in the game for a while. It was about traps in the past. We've done a rework this season where when you cast a trap, or rather every 10 seconds when you cast the trap, you're going to get a bonus Death Trap. So you could cast Poison Trap or Caltrops or Death Trap itself, and then you get a second Death Trap. And when you actually cast the Death Trap active button, you're going to kind of jump or teleport to that position, so you can just instantly get into the fray there.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, so rogues are all about mobility and jumping around the battlefield and doing that kind of thing. This is just another tool in their arsenal to really jump in, put the Death Trap down, which groups up some enemies, and then they're ready for you to slaughter there. But let's take a look at the new items that talk to Poison Trap specifically. The Bands of Icarus Rose, these are unique gloves that says your Poison Trap, which normally has a 9-second duration, it's always going to do its full damage over 3 seconds instead. So it's much shorter duration, but higher DPS. And it's always going to benefit from all of its upgrades, you know, that enhancement and those modifications. You just get all of them. You don't need to put skill points in. And normally the two choices are mutually exclusive. You get both with these, and they're going to be even more powerful. Additionally, Poison Trap will now also benefit from your combo points if you're using those. It's going to have no cooldown during the Inner Sight if you're using Inner Sight, and if you're using Preparation, its cooldown is going to be reduced by the Preparation trigger. So previously, Poison Trap didn't really interact with any of these 3 mechanics very well, and now it benefits from whichever one you want.
That's so cool. So it really makes it more like a core skill, something I can work into my rotation.
Oh yeah, yeah. You're going to be wanting to use this very often with this unique. And then the aspect of contamination, as many builds that focus around poison on rogue often want to build critical strike damage because that's really good with the poison imbuement. Poison Trap now also can scale up with some critical strike chance. So with aspect of contamination, it unleashes a poison burst when it detonates, like kind of initial upfront hit. And then if that burst critically strikes, which, you know, if you build in a lot of crit chance, it probably will, or if you hit a lot of enemies, then you're going to deal increased poison damage for a duration, which will of course increase the rest of the duration of the Poison Trap.
And speaking of that vampiric curse stacking, soul stacking, I hope you can immediately stack souls while after casting the skill. Oh, that's a cool. That's a cool one. Like knocking down the enemy.
Take a little nap in your poison traps. I don't recommend it.
Boom.
If
That's nice.
They take a ton of poison damage.
I love the knockdown animation of this kind of enemy.
Yeah, so good. This guy just falls right
sit down. Lay down, I guess.
His face is in it.
Yeah. His face plants and then succumbs to the poison. It's awesome. All right, moving on, we've got our Sorceress. So the Sorceress class definitely is one of the ones currently on Season 7 that I think didn't have any of these real big outlier builds that we'd kind of talked about. Some of the highest highs come from like the Blood Necro or the Druid with the snapshotting Cataclysm. And I think I definitely want to acknowledge that, you know, Sorceress maybe didn't have some of those real outliers this season, and they were maybe felt like they were a bit behind of those. So as we talked about with other classes, we're definitely looking at bringing those outlier builds down a notch to bring them kind of back to the norm of some of the other builds, so they're not so far ahead. But for Sorceress, we're looking at improving some of the quality of life and some of the interactions between some of their mechanics like crackling energy, meteors and meteorites, and making sure they scale well with the build. Like crackling energy will now have the shock skill tag, so if you're building up damage for shock skills or some of the other synergies there, those now interact with your crackling energy. And additionally with Meteor and Meteorites, they're not going to be able to scale with each other's damage, which helps builds just be a bit more cohesive and feel more robustly supported. That being said, I think where Sorceress has been in Season 7 is in terms of like its power progression and the relative strength of its builds amongst each other is more of the closer to the ideal state of where we envision all classes ending up. We recognize that they are kind of a bit lower than other classes in Season 7, but we're looking at bringing them up a little bit with improved quality of life and build options, and making sure that some of the outlier builds that's really skewing that perception are being brought to be to
Bring them close together.
Yeah.
And create some more harmony between the classes.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think this is something that we're actively looking at again to the point of early in the season. If things aren't really performing to the level of our expectation and it doesn't feel good, then those are things that we're going to buff. And Sorceress is a great example of like what we're going to be really looking at.
Yeah, and we want to do that in ways that make, we don't just want to slap on a 50x scaler on Sorceress. We want to make sure that the builds feel cohesive and coherent in a way that makes a lot of sense. And so that's what the bulk of our focus is for Sorc this season. Specifically, I want to talk a little bit about ice shards. That's what the new unique is going to be working with here. Let's take a look at the unique, the Hail of Verglass. This is a unique helm that's going to empower your ice shards to spread out rather than shoot in kind of a straight line, that kind of rapid fire. It's now going to be a spread pattern. You can hit more enemies with it, and you get bonus shards, and you're going to be dealing increased damage for every time an ice shards damages an enemy, and it's going to stack up. So it takes a lot of stacks. You need to be spamming ice shards. You need to be hitting a lot. But once you do, it unleashes a lot of bonus damage. And it also makes the skill, in my opinion, a lot more usable, right? I like the spread pattern a whole lot. Lets you hit wider screen, and you can kind of like shotgun enemies if you get nice.
Sorry, I'm not really familiar with the other class. I just mainly play the Necromancer.
Enemies are going to take increased damage based on how much they're chilled or staggering.
But it seems like they're adding one new unique and one new offensive aspect.
Which, hey, bosses are the theme of the season.
New offensive aspect on next season.
These new effects that scale based on the crowd control effects also work against bosses. So this will kind of take how much stagger you've built up on the boss and also give you a bonus damage based on that. So really being cognizant of, hey, let's make sure this works in the situations you want it to. And it's
Well, that is nice. Increased damage based on how much they are chilled or staggered.
We want to make sure that's a bit smoother of an experience between the two ways of playing. All right, let's take a look at the Hail of Verglass with these new ice shards in action. Right, so they fire out pretty quick. They fire out in a nice spread, and you can clear through whole packs of skeletons with a single cast here.
It's multi-shot.
Oh yeah,
Multi-shot with ice shards.
Yeah. Oh yeah. All right, and moving on to our final class here, the Spiritborn. So the Spiritborn was in a pretty good state. I mean, similar to Sorceress, where it didn't have those crazy overpowered builds, but we think it's in a relatively healthy spot, and we're just looking at empowering new build options and making tighter synergies between the builds and giving you some new tools to play with. With that in mind, we took a look at Rushing Claw. It's one of my favorite skills on the Spiritborn, but never really found its way into any of the most popular builds in the past couple seasons since Spiritborn was released. And we've updated the two upgrade choices to be kind of transformative. It's kind of if you pick one upgrade, the current one, Rushing Claws has 4 charges, and so when you use a charge, you kind of quickly dash through an enemy. And so you got 4 charges, you can spam it 4 times real quick. The other upgrade now.
Yeah, on season 6, so many players are playing Spiritborn. Now a lot of people playing Bloodwing and Cataclysm.
But for every charge that it consumes, it deals massively increased damage, and it hits a wider area.
Like I rarely see like
gaining more charges actually just increases your damage output.
Even Blood Surge, Blood. I see some minion build,
Powerful and very cool. Or you can choose the new upgrade and kind of.
but I haven't seen Army of the Dead playing on
cooldown,
open world.
on building up those charges again to deal even more. Additionally, we've looked at Storm Feathers and specifically how they interact with the new unique item, the Sunbird's Gorget, which I think we've got a picture of right here. So the Sunbird's Gorget is a new unique amulet. This really works to synergize with the Eagle and Jaguar builds. So it says picking up a Storm Feather, which you can create in many different ways, will form a firestorm around you for 8 seconds that deals fire damage. And every additional storm feather that you pick up is going to intensify this firestorm. It's going to make it grow in size up to a maximum, and then it's going to increase its damage output. For as many storm feathers as you can spawn, this firestorm is going to get more intense. But it only lasts for 8 seconds, so intensifying it or picking up more storm feathers, it's not going to extend the duration. So it's kind of locked to that 8-second duration, and then it'll reset. So you really want to collect as many storm feathers as possible in 8 seconds, and then it restarts. And also this firestorm is considered an eagle, jaguar, and storm feather skill. So
One feather heals for maximum life. 2 guaranteed to overpower, guaranteed to critical strike. But I hope this is just a one-time event.
And following up on the theme with
Or during that 8 seconds, the Russian Claw is going to critically overpower.
You had when you cast it. So if you're taking the upgrade that gives you 12 charges, it's probably always going to be with 4+, and so it's going to strike an additional time. But if you're choosing the option where you spend each charge as you go, it's going to go through a bit of a cycle here. You're going to get an additional strike, then it's going to get a guaranteed crit, then it's going to get a guaranteed overpower, and when you just have 1 charge left, it's going to give you a nice chunky heal.
Ah, okay, so it's just 1 charge.
There's a ton of versatility in there.
Yeah, lots of different ways to play, and it works great with either way that Russian Claw now works. All right, let's take a look.
So you're waiting for that
in action here, right? So you're moving
charge.
around, you're picking up tons of these feathers, and the firestorm around you just grows in intensity. You've got lots of different ways to scale it up, and it provides a nice kind of passive AoE around you as you're picking them up. And you're really going to want to make sure you're kind of thinking about exactly how your character is moving to make sure you're picking up as many of these storm feathers as possible to maximize your damage output. All right, that's a lot. We got a lot of new class content coming for every class. We did get through all.
Or is it going to overpower within that 8 seconds?
Seeing all the new builds that these empower, how they modify old existing builds, and all the interesting combinations that I'm sure all of you will test out.
I think it only because it says strike one more time.
Yes, please let us know if you find something absolutely broken, which I'm sure you will. So thank you again, Charles, for walking us through all the different class changes. Again, this is, we do plan on having patch notes along with the blog related to everything tied to PTR. So there's other changes that we didn't actually cover off in here. That will be
how many
on
minutes left?
the Diablo4.com immediately after the stream.
21 minutes.
Check it out, inspect it, do their theory crafting and everything related to that. Of course, with PTR, we kind of want to know when PTR actually begins. PTR is starting next Tuesday, and this is, of course, PTR on PC BattleNet. So players
Tuesday.
will be able to jump in starting on the 11th, and it'll run for a week there. I will note that players actually will be able to also pre-download the PTR the day prior. So around Monday afternoon here in California, I translate that using some sort of time tool. That will be when players will be able to pre-download, so it'll be about a day beforehand. One thing to note is, of course, the boost vendor, Marak, will be available, which will be dancing in town for everyone. But one thing we did want to note is that the boosts themselves will be available probably 2 days after the PTR actually begins. The reason behind this is actually a little bit tied to how Season 7 performed. One thing we allowed players to do was immediately boost the second they got into PTR, and we really didn't get that whole entire flow as we were kind of going through.
The headhunt and things like that. So we also just want to hear your feedback on the leveling process, right? This is why we run the PTR. We really want to hear your thoughts on how the sort of more uniform leveling feels, how the legendary drop rates feel. So that is really valuable to us for launching a really awesome Season 8 Return of Belial.
Yeah, and so after a couple days, Marak will be more than happy to take your Paragon levels to...
Are they saying, give me a second.
Uniform leveling feels, how the legendary drop rates feel. So that is really valuable to us for launching a really awesome Season 8. Right? So we want to just
our flow as we were boost. We did want to note is that the boosts themselves will be available probably 2 days after the PTR actually begins. The reason behind this is actually a little bit tied to how Season 7 performed. One thing we allowed players to do was immediately boost the second they got into PTR, and we really didn't get that whole entire flow as we were kind of
okay.
The headhunt and things like that.
So they want us
We
to
just want to hear your feedback on the leveling process, right? This is why we run the PTR.
feel the leveling leveling process, like the journey?
From leveling
Is it
drop rates feel so?
yeah, the drop rates, the leveling, the progression, how it feels like on season 8?
Yeah, and so after a couple days,
Because yeah, most people will just jump in, level up immediately, getting those items, Paragon board, then playing the testing out the new items.
One other thing I do
End
want to note
games.
is we will of course have our forums available and online for PTR. That is the best place to actually provide feedback. Of course, we do look in other places such as Reddit, Discord, etc. But I will say, like, the forums is kind of, we turn them on specifically, like a PTR section. So please put feedback in there, because we are constantly checking in there for any notes, feedback from players on that end. One other note is within the PTR, you guys may see a term called the reliquary that may just kind of pop up here and there, and we haven't talked about the reliquary, nor will the blog later today actually be talking about the reliquary. I will say that you guys will hear more about the reliquary before the start of Season 8 in itself, but for right now, ignore it. I don't know. Turn a blind eye. I don't know. But it is a rework of our battle pass system that we're doing. We're trying to. We've heard a lot of comments from players related to the battle pass. We're trying to make it a little bit more customizable for people, especially for rewards that they're looking for. So we'll have a detailed breakdown of what the reliquary is before Season 8. So looking forward to kind of sharing that before we actually kick off this season.
But I do hope that there will be like more rewards, like mounts, cosmetics
I've gotten asked a million
for each season, not just from the battle rewards. Like maybe upon killing Belial, there will be like a new mount.
On a roadmap that we can share with you all, which is great because it gives you and everyone
Or you get the
opportunity to kind
a
of
new
see
wing, right?
the future vision of what's coming for Diablo 4. We do plan on actually having this roadmap out before Season 8, so we're really excited to share it. So as soon as we actually do have that available, we of course you'll hear it everywhere. We will be on every single microphone and megaphone out there showcasing what the roadmap is. And you've probably seen roadmap. If you're curious, like what does a roadmap entail, you've probably seen some of our fellow teams here at Blizzard, such as like Diablo Immortal or like World of Warcraft. They've actually posted these more public-facing roadmaps, and that's something that we want to do here, so that you guys have that ability of being able to see what's coming out for Diablo 4 and more exciting news related to it. So. I know we have Q&A. We want to jump into Q&A here really quickly. So if you guys do have any questions or anything, of course, we have our chat available on the Twitch link for Diablo. So feel free to jump in and ask any questions. I know we always queue it up with one question specifically. And do we have a question slide here? There we go. How does party play work with lair bosses? We kind of covered this a little bit, but I don't know if you guys want to go into specifically more details on this.
Yeah, I can jump into that. So when you are fighting the lair bosses in a party and the horde spawns, when you open the horde, we essentially do a bonus chance for an extra drop based on the amount of party play. So if you're in a party of 4 and you open up that horde, it's going to guarantee an extra unique item. So it scales with the amount of parties or party members you have, and it's always a good time, when you get together with people.
Awesome. I'm like, I'm so unprepared. All right, let me look through the questions here as a.
Okay, so it's like the same thing with the mythic drop rate. The more people in your party, the more rate increases. The more people in your party have.
Let's see, this is from Skulm TV. Any plans to place a blacksmith or vendor near the boss rooms to help people quickly salvage / clear inventory without having to go into town?
I think this is something that we can definitely take away and consider, especially with the revamp flow. That's definitely something that's interesting. One thing that the revamp flow does, I will touch on, is the amount of chain bossing really requires you to have a lot more materials. If anything, sort of some philosophy here is that we've heard a lot of feedback that it feels mandatory to play some of these bosses in a party just because chain bossing is so lucrative. We do expect some amount of the chain bossing to come down a little bit, because a lot lot more of the resources are being consumed when opening those chests. So it's not a direct answer to your question. I think it's an interesting idea, but I do think the amount of chain bossing and required trips and flow breaks to go back to town from some of this bossing is going to come down a little bit, especially if you've been playing a ton of partying.
Awesome. Question from Fan27. Q&A, or sorry, he wrote Diablo Q&A, and I just read that out loud. Any chance we will have to redo strongholds and waypoints on every character every single season?
I can answer that one too. Yeah, this is something I definitely experience. It's always a big pain in the ass where it's like, oh, there's some cool bounty or apparition incursion, but I have to go get the waypoint. It's something the team has been talking about. There's no concrete plans today, which I know is disappointing, but it's something we know is a problem and something we 100% want to tackle in the near future.
Awesome. Jokums says, this is actually a question that we were talking about that might actually come up, but like, would you consider adding the frog from Witch Powers in Season 7 as a permanent companion skill for druids? And at the moment I can say we're not for that specifically, but it is a thing that I think we didn't really clarify in regards to what from Season 7 is kind of like for sure staying over. I will say like the Witch Powers are most definitely like something that aren't carrying over completely over to the future seasons, but one thing in regards to at least the Tree of Whispers is that like we have a bunch of new NPCs there. We redid the layout there. That is made that as a hub that doesn't feel like I'm just going for the tree and I have to like immediately leave.
But maybe they could.
It's made it as like.
Maybe they could retain the.
Tap into from that end.
Go ahead.
I can speak a bit to the seasonal powers.
Maybe the
those witchcraft powers are specific to Season 7. That is true. They are not necessarily coming back in
the headhunt events.
But we do hear that feedback, right? I think they got a really positive reception. A lot of like the poison frog, one of my favorites. The fire bats, and all kinds of other things that are very visually flashy and just a lot of fun to play with. We hear that, and that definitely helps us to inform like making future content. In the past, we've done that where we've taken some favorite seasonal mechanics, put them on items to return. I can't speak to any particular plans, but just know that we do hear this feedback, and it'll definitely help us to help craft content in the future.
We got a lot of questions related to PTR because I know, as I mentioned, this is a PC BattleNet PTR, and there's a few people like Kim from Canada, and I can't read this because the text color is so just jarring. But we've gotten a lot of questions related to PTR being on PC BattleNet and asking like, hey, is there any plans on bringing it to console, maybe Steam? I will say the reason why PC BattleNet works best for us is that BattleNet is a platform that is housed here at Blizzard, and is the processes of getting builds up there, making it, like any type of change, especially for PTR where we're in a smaller window and we may need to change something really quickly. Just it gives us more flexibility and allows us to be able to change those things really, really smoothly. I know with other platforms and everything, there's more processes involved for good reason, because they have more checks and balances and everything. So it makes it a little bit more difficult on our end to do some of those fast iterations that we may need with PTR. So in the foreseeable future right now, we see PC BattleNet as being kind of the home for PTRs when we do end up testing anything. Question from my computer's telling me to update. It's been telling me for weeks. Don't hate me, IT. Chris Mate says, will the lair bosses have resilience / damage reduction that the world bosses have to ensure that they just don't get one shot too fast with some classes or builds I can't talk today.
Trivializing. Yeah. No,
I can't even talk.
I think this is a great question. It's something we actually talk about on the team a bunch. And from our perspective, adding something like resilience would sort of devalue that power progression. Like we feel like it sort of disservices that sort of zero to hero. Once Belial was really hard, but now I've gotten so strong I can just crush him. That said, we do think that the level of one-shotting bosses that has been happening is a little bit too much. There isn't enough of a journey to get to a point where I can just stomp on Varshan or I can stomp on the Penitent Knight. So what we have done is, like Derek mentioned earlier in the stream, we've massively buffed a lot of these bosses. Like so much so that we're kind of like, try it on the PTR and see. But a lot of these bosses should present more of a journey to getting to a place where you can really stomp on them throughout the torment tiers. Even Uber Lilith herself has.
But I do hope that the reward from killing those rare bosses would be
Apparently now it's just stuck. Yeah.
even at Torment 1 and 2. If your build is not strong enough, you're only crashing Torment 1 or 2, I believe the reward will still be great.
So you're not just like walking into Torment 1 and
So that you have this fun and satisfying that you are going to progress and making your build more better by fighting these bosses as you climb up to the next torment tier.
The best gameplay. Like, it's just it's fun for a little bit to go in and one shot everything, but that's something we think it's much more engaging to have a little bit of back and forth, and you're not just going in and stomping them, but you do feel powerful, feel some power progression, and as you get more powerful and more gear and more paragon levels, you do get more powerful and it becomes easier to overcome these challenges, and then you start feeling that real powerful stuff as you really complete your build.
Yeah, and I'll also say like
Because right now it's just you are playing the
boss ladder.
you climb up to Torment 4 already, and now you're crushing the boss, so there's no more room to progress or to have these more challenges.
You would only fight it when it's really difficult. But the changes that we've made have really sort of, in a fun way, I'm hoping this plays out, that you can sort of maybe get a cheeky run in on Varshan when maybe he's really hard, but you get a really powerful unique because you don't have to risk anything anymore to actually summon him.
Yeah, I think it also kind of speaks to just the approach of injecting challenge across the lair bosses, like we discussed. We could just do straight stat boosts and that would definitely resolve it, but within Season 8 the team took the extra opportunity to also just inject new mechanics and updated mechanics to the lair bosses across the board to introduce that hiked challenge, but in an interesting way that's just more fun, I guess, really for us to enjoy.
We have a question related to, I'm going to speed through a few last questions here. Lilith, will Lilith ever make a entry into maybe the boss layer system or anything? This is from Ganon North.
Yeah, I think that's something that we've been thinking about, and like what's the right place and what's the right time for something like that. She's in an interesting spot now where she's kind of like the pinnacle of the season's journey a lot of times, and that's something we can definitely think about, especially with this revamped flow of being able to.
Well, Lilith doesn't have so much loot when you kill her now.
That'd be a lot of fun.
Quick question related to the Spiritborn. This is from the Schwab. Does the new Russian Claw aspect power give you all the previous bonuses at 4+ charges, or just the extra cast?
It's just the extra one. So so if you're casting it at 4 or more charges, it only hits an extra time. It does not get guaranteed crit or overpower or heal you. It's you kind of either progress through one benefit at a time, or you just get the 4+ if you're using the new upgrade.
I'm going to do 2 quick last questions. I will end on the one that everyone's asking. I see it in chat. Don't worry. In regards to I lost it. There it is. From Mid Central Vowel, at what point will you start maybe potentially removing uniques that have proven to be not that useful, or do you guys feel like uniques are feeling bloated in the current setup?
I think I actually feel like we don't necessarily have enough uniques in terms of speaking to every skill. Like, I think that's something that you see with the poison trap and you see with ice shards. That is sort of why we have the boss ladder, to give you more deterministic, or maybe not deterministic, but targeted ways to find some of the uniques you're looking for. This lets us have a lot of different uniques, but things that you actually have to target. The other thing I'll just say too is, like, part of the game is random items and figuring out how to assemble a build out of the random items. So, like, we don't want to get to a place where I just sort of log into Diablo and I get all the uniques I want, and then I'm sort of done with the game, and it's just sort of this linear.
Like the Death Speaker's Pendant, Mother's Embrace, Sacrilegious Soul is, you can see for Necromancer player, you don't see you don't see them being used a lot. So maybe those can be removed for a while until they are going to be reworked more efficiently.
Unique designs. I think there are still some spots in the game, like with Poison Trap this season, where there were some skills or some play styles that had had some threads there, but
did I say Sacrilegious Soul? It's Sacrilegious Ring. I was used to Sacrilegious Soul because it's a jewel before back in season 1.
Builds or play styles that we think are interesting and fun with new uniques every season. But additionally, we are also taking a look at kind of the catalog of uniques we have in the game. So a good example on Rogue again is the Scoundrel's Leather this season. That was an item that was sometimes played, but not often for its actual unique effect. For some of its affixes, actually, it was pretty powerful. But its unique effect was pretty lackluster, and so we've done just a whole rework on it. We said, hey, what's the identity of this? Well, it's talking to Death Trap builds in a way, but in a way that wasn't super compelling. And so we said, well, let's kind of scrap that existing effect, and how can we better support that? Let's take another try at this. So that's one way that we're going to look to find those underused uniques that really maybe don't find a home. We're going to constantly be reevaluating them and seeing how we can kind of plus them up and make them achieve the potential and fulfill that build niche that they were intended to do in the first place.
All right, I'm going to end it with the last question because everyone's asking this related to aspirational content. Are there more plans for that? Things like whether it's potential leaderboards to more like end game type of features and stuff. Where are we in regards to some of that?
Yeah, I'll say the team absolutely, this is top of mind and something that we absolutely want to improve in terms of adding more milestones for you to reach, more satisfying and more rewarding milestones and celebrating those milestones. So the team is actively sort of looking at what are ways that we can level up some of the aspirational feel of the game. I'll also say just in Season 8, again, a lot of the tournament tiers and bosses have really been leveled up. And I'll say, again, the pit has been pretty massively buffed. So there are some tuning changes we've made just to make the game, the pieces that we have today, a little bit more aspirational and challenging and satisfying to overcome. We really think Season 7 was a fun candy rush, and it was a sugar rush, sort of like the smoothies everyone's binge drinking behind the scenes.
Not everyone.
Not everyone. Yeah. Only the important
There's a
people
note
behind
now
the
that
screen.
says that it got delivered midstream.
Okay. Wow.
Yeah, Marcus redeemed.
Yeah, but Season 7 was really fast, and we do think when the game reaches that state of where just nothing really, you have to work for it, and it's just really fast, and it's over in a weekend, totally, there's not enough things to work towards. So we are sort of taking an approach, again, with some of the balance changes to make some of the game feel a little bit more aspirational, and it's a focus for our team going forward.
Yeah, I will say we've had conversations about this. I feel like almost weekly. Colin and I talk about it a whole lot. I know there's a lot of discussions happening and a lot of people thinking about that specifically from that end. So. Huge shout out and thanks to you guys for jumping in, and to Ruben, of course, for jumping into the build and running through everything. Again, PTR is going to be starting next Tuesday. You can early download on PC Battle.net starting Monday afternoon California time, and we will have a blog and patch notes and everything available for people to check out immediately after this stream. Really looking to everyone jumping in, testing out the new boss layer system, of course, the new powers that are associated with it, all the class changes, and all the quality of life stuff that we talked about in terms of like the leveling journey as you're going up within this new season. So really looking forward to everyone jumping in. Please make sure to take advantage of giving us your feedback on the forums or Reddit or Discord, other places. We're going to be most definitely checking it out starting all next week. So thank you guys again. We have March of the Goblins, which is currently going on in Diablo 4, and we have a D2R ladder reset tonight.
Still no Frederick.
Feel free to jump in. It's always a fun time. We will see you guys in the PTR next week and really appreciate it. Thanks all.
Thanks, everyone.
All right. Good stream. New updates.